On this episode of the Leadership Hustle, we're going to discuss what to do as a leader when employees are not seeing eye to eye. Hello, and welcome to the Leadership Hustle for executives whose companies are growing fast and need leaders who are ready. Hey, welcome back to this episode of the Leadership Hustle. I'm Andrea Fredrickson.
I'm Michelle Hill.
And today we are going to tackle the topic of when do leaders need to get involved with the people they lead when there's conflict between the two.
Yeah.
And so this topic came up because recently there was a gentleman that reached out and said, okay, I need help. I've got a couple of folks who are leading different parts of the company, and they're not just getting along, but it seems as though they are pitting their departments against each other a little bit. And it's like, oh, what do I do? And so, I thought, this isn't something that happens every day, but, we do have oftentimes people asking us that question. It's like, I got people that don't get along. What do I do with them? Right?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And so,
especially at the higher level, I would say is where, well, either one of two things. People get really concerned and really don't know how to handle it, or they don't address it.
Right, and that's the other part. And so,
whether it's avoiding, fear of upsetting, whatever that may be, right?
So let's just talk about, I think let's leave it at that higher level where we've got, VPs or directors or, that level of folks where you've got departments or you've got divisions that just are not working well together. And you and I both have had those scenarios where it's like, they're grown-ass adults, just let them take care of it. I'm like, yeah, but, they need to do something.
Clearly they're not.
So why is it so important that those leaders do, they've got to figure out how to get along, right? Why is that so important? Because, for most of the part, they've got a team of people or multiple teams underneath them that are doing their job. Why does the leader even need to get involved with that? Like, why do that?
Well, I think you could actually take two-prong here approach.
Okay.
First, within an organization, is it part of our culture that we have peer-to-peer accountability, and that when we don't agree or we see things, differently, the expectation is that we have a conversation and we talk through it, right? So you have some environments that they're very intentional, whether it's through our guidance and conversations and whatever, and other people that will do it, but you're very intentional about, we are going to get along, right? We are going to work well together. We're going to be respectful. We're going to set the example on what we expect of our employees and how they're going to get along. And you're going to, as leaders at the higher levels, are going to role model it. And that's an expectation, right? And when we don't have that expectation, though, then it's kind of like, when you open the door at recess with a bunch of kindergartners, they go out on the playground and they do what they want to do because there's no rules. And that's where you get to, oh, okay, so you've got now two people who have decided not to get along. And that's a choice they've made, both of them independently. Right. The consequences is it ripples through the organization.
It does.
And it will tell people, if you have values or like a kind of a define how you want people to work together, but yet people at a higher level are not role modeling it, you're now telling people that these values or team norms or company culture really isn't true, because the people at those levels are they can't do it, right? And unconsciously, or just unaware, the way they communicate to their teams can really create these internal stories, things that people think about the other departments in a negative light. And I don't believe, more often than not, I don't believe it's intentional. I'm going with the people have good intentions concept here. But when they're frustrated because their peer in another area, does something or, didn't bring them in or involve them, or they did this totally intentional. What are they doing? And they say these frustrations out loud. Their people hear it. Their people then get frustrated, and they start disrespecting sometimes that leader, and it also goes across to the peers of the other area. So now you've just got a bunch of freaking drama. So
and who's got
at the end of the day,
right?
Yeah, who wants to deal with that?
I was thinking as you were talking, I had another group of folks just reach out and talk about the fact that, CEO is saying, I've got people that don't trust me. And how do we address that conversation? And how do we address that conflict? And then there are people within the leadership team that are I'm going to say ganging up, but they're siding against other people on the organization. And so it's become cliquey, it's become dramatic, it's because there's some misunderstanding, I have this expectation, somebody doesn't follow through or doesn't meet that expectation.
And then a known expectation, right?
Right. So, there's a lot of research that talks about, it's not so much that you have to like the person, but you have to trust them. Okay?
You have to trust their ability to do the job.
They have to, and in most cases, where that trust starts to be lax is when because there's a misunderstanding. There is an expectation of deadlines or an expectations of the ability to fulfill a role or responsibility that you have that the other person doesn't know you have, but you know you have, or that maybe that there's they're missing the compassion for what the other person is doing. And so this whole issue of people not getting along really does stem from a lack of trust. And then once you start getting that habit of thought inside your mind, now you start looking for the evidence to prove how right you are and how wrong they are. So we can go down that path.
Spirals.
Yes.
Just continues to spiral. And it's just a negative environment.
Right. And so what you're doing is spending way more time on the things that do not create revenue or move the needle in your company, and you're spending time on the drama and all those social issues that, we got enough issues. We don't need to start at the top, right?
Yeah.
And so as we think about that, how do we approach, especially when the senior groups, either the most senior group or the next level of leaders that are going on? I know I'm asking a question I'm going to start answering a little bit, but we do a lot of work with that senior team, right? That executive, the owner, the CEO, whoever that top person is, and their direct reports. And the concept that we've talked about in other episodes is this team one? Are you all in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, believing what we're trying to accomplish, having conversations where you can debate and you can challenge each other, and getting comfortable doing that? That has to be that's got to be first and foremost. But when that's not happening, now, what do we do? Like, what does the CEO do in this case? Any recommendations or any bits of advice that you would give our listeners for that?
Well, just to kind of shrink it down a little bit, you have to address it.
You have to do something.
I mean, you can't just sit there and pretend like it's not happening. Whether you take the approach where you have individual conversations and asking them how they feel, or you outsource the conversations to, and I'm going to say, when I say outsource, but it's finding out how each person on that leadership group feel about each other. We can call it a 360 if you want, but it's really finding out what are their beliefs, or that the strengths are about the team in general, and then each individual, and what are those opportunities for this team to get better. And it's the second thing is going to be setting expectations. So that would be a group discussion, but it's what are the expectations on how we're working together. And if they have the courage to have the conversation with the group as well about, these are things that I've noticed. What have you guys noticed? Or what's important? I mean, you could spin it so many different ways, but where I want to say that individual is going to have what may be viewed as a difficult conversation, and getting people to talk about it.
Yeah. Oftentimes it starts with one, right? There's one person that isn't bringing forth information or withholding information or not fulfilling their role in some way. And so without them trying to find their person that they're going to hang on to and side with anybody else, it's a matter of, what is the person not doing or not meeting their expectation, and are they willing to do something about it, right? And then you have to talk to the other person or persons and say, are you willing to do something about this? Because it takes two to have a relationship, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's.
And I've run across situations like, no, I don't trust them. I flat out don't think they're going to be able to do the job. And quite frankly, that's just how I live my life. I'm just going to do that. So then the owner, the CEO, has to make the decision. It's like, if you're not willing to make the change, right? And it's critical that we keep moving forward. Everybody else is doing fine. There may have to be a change. That person may have to choose to change, or they may have to be given the choice to move on to something different.
Yeah.
Because they become a virus in that.
Yes.
But there are times where both parties truly are not helping each other, right? They're truly
I
not
think
working well together.
I believe more often it may start with one person. Well, one person maybe, and I think a lot of it's more still misunderstanding. But the other person then starts keeping score, and it starts going back and forth. And,
Right.
and that other person, like in any relationship, they both are equally responsible. And then it can spread out to others as well. So it really does go back, though, to are we being intentional about setting expectations on how this number one team is going to work together?
Right.
And are we also taking time to get to know each other and build trust? And I don't want to use necessarily the word vulnerable in a way that, I'm weak, but it's, if I don't know how to do something in the organization, I need to feel safe to say, you know what, I have not used a system like this before, and let's say I'm newer too, right? So I would like, who can help me learn this? I will learn this. I just need someone to help me learn it, right?
Right.
People need to feel safe to speak up for that. So maybe this person doesn't know how to use a system, that the software system or whatever, right? But they don't feel safe to speak up, and then the other person is frustrated because they're not using it accurately, and so that's where that friction takes place, right?
Right.
But how are you helping them?
So when I talked to this person that called and wanted some advice on this, I said, well, first of all, you got to bring them together.
Yes.
Right? Bring the two folks that are really struggling together. And going back to what you said, it's like setting the expectation is these departments are obviously very entwined. Otherwise, we wouldn't even know this was an issue, right? So they're very entwined. Here's what the things that we're noticing. I'm not looking for fault, but we've got to figure out how the two of you are going to figure out how to move forward in a professional, respectful, helpful way.
Yeah.
Because it's affecting, like you said at the very beginning, it's rippling through the entire organization because people know these departments are at each other's throats. Maybe not quite that, but that's kind of where we're at. And so as we talked through this process, we said we've got to make sure we set some rules. One person talking at a time.
Yes.
We're not looking for how can I prove how right I am and how wrong you are. We're listening to understand where that person's coming from and what they're trying to accomplish, and how can we create a solution between the two as opposed to everybody has to give in. Because there's if you're both giving in, you feel like you're both losing, right? But there's oftentimes a third perspective that neither one of you have thought of that could help solve this problem or could help make this process better or could alleviate the misunderstandings that are going on with each other. I'm a firm believer in if the two people can't have the conversation without a third party, that you need to have somebody there that can help referee the emotion or sometimes say one person at a time or what's causing you to be defensive about that statement? Because people bring in their own baggage. We can't see it.
Correct.
And so how do we help navigate, that's what I thought I heard. I'm like, that's not what I heard, kind of thinking that goes along with that.
Yes.
And it sounds so petty. It sounds so petty to do. But I think that that people believe that the higher you go up in the organization, that they know how to disagree. And I am, just because you get a different title doesn't give you more information about how to do some of these things that we need to do from emotional intelligence and from a leadership perspective. So we have to be taught those things.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to, as you get promoted, some of the things from when it comes to self-awareness and personal development, things that are critical for your success is the ability to listen, because we all really suck at it. No matter how hard we try, it's a compound skill. So, right, you have to have patience. It's not just listening.
Right.
There's a lot to it. But being able to be a good listener and listening not to judge, but listening to understand, and we could go forever on that one. But I also think you have to get better at and focus on how do I get better at it. Not because just because I got a title doesn't mean I am, but for us to have a conversation and totally disagree and have it be productive, right? I think we also have to have the skill of being able to have a difficult conversation. And when I say difficult, I'm leaning into the well, maybe it is we have to let you go, but it's difficult because it's uncomfortable.
Right. Right.
It's not that we disagree. And maybe we have to bring something to light. Like sometimes when we provide 360 feedback, right? Sometimes it can be kind of harsh or feel that way.
Harsh.
Yeah. And that can be difficult, but we still have to, how do we do it in a caring way with the whole idea of helping them get better, right? And then we also, I think, have to get better at how do we give and receive feedback? Because how you want feedback is probably completely different how I want feedback.
Sure.
But you're probably going to deliver it how you want it, which isn't how I want it, right?
Unless we're taught to do it differently.
Correct.
Yes.
And so, but I think those are, how many was there? 4? 4 basic skills that people can learn and get better. And I think you have to always be working at them. No matter what your title is, just because you were promoted, more often than not, that means you're good at a technical situation. You're really good at X technical.
And you take initiative, and you might solve good problems.
It's not the human factor that you're really good at. And those you need almost daily. Right.
So let's go back, because we're kind of wandering all over a little bit. But, as the leader, whether it's the CEO of the initial leadership team, or you're on the leadership team and you've got leader of leaders that you're working with, underneath you or in your department, first and foremost, we've got to understand what we're here for. We're here for one common purpose, and that's to help our customers do whatever it is you're trying to do, right? Or your clients or your constituents, that we are here together to make that happen. 2 is more than likely between the 2 people, there's a misunderstanding. Something about either we're keeping a score or a story we've told ourselves isn't working, and there's something there that's not quite right. There are going to be times where we simply disagree, and then how hard is it, or how tightly are we hanging on to our opinion and just saying, you know what? Fine, you do it your way. I'll show you later that, I told you so kind of thing. It's like, wait a second, that's not really helpful, because that's where the intention is. We believe the intention of people are good. We want to help solve the problem, but there's almost always a different way to solve the problem. So getting people together, putting some expectations in the room, letting people talk one at a time, remembering that we're listening to understand, not listening to, let me prove how right I am, when the retaliation conversation of what's going on. But mostly, first and foremost of all of this, leader can't put their head in the sand and say, oh, they'll take care of it themselves.
Correct.
Because we hope they will, but if they would have done it a while ago, and it's still festering, and maybe it's getting bigger. So, with this episode, I hope people take the stance, if you weren't already thinking this, that leader, it's time for you to leave and do something difficult, okay? And it's more of a matter of fact, hey, this is what we do. This is how we're going to do this. Moving forward, we're going to figure out how to work better together. We're going to learn how to trust each other. We're going to learn how to make sure things are moving forward. And if that's not something either one of you are willing to do, we're going to have to do something different. And it's like, that's not a threat. It's simply, that's just a matter of fact. Those are the expectations of what's going on.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us on this episode of The Leadership Hustle. We hope you subscribe so you never miss another episode.